All right, so standard form of an equation, the h and the k represent the center, the r represents the radius. Let's see what we're going to do. All right, so in problem number 1, I'm just going to give you a center, and I'm going to give you a radius, and you're going to write out the equation. So the first thing I would do is I would write out the generic form of the standard equation of a circle, which is off of your formula sheet, and that's just as simple as writing down x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Don't have to memorize that. That's on your formula sheet. And then it's just as simple as plugging in the numbers where we go. We don't even have to math anything. So if the center represents h and k, and the radius is represented by r, what do you think you'd put in for this h right here? A 5. What are you going to put in for that k? Negative 2. And what are you going to put in for the r? 7. Now, this can be simplified a little bit, but really there's nothing to evaluate. There's nothing to simplify here, so that's just x minus 5 squared. Y minus a negative 2 would be y plus 2 squared, and 7 squared is equal to 49. Does that make sense? Everybody okay with that? You got a question?
No, I was having difficulty typing it and write this down.
Okay. All right. So all I'm doing is I'm just taking the values and putting them in where they go. So we notice that h was 5, so I put it in for 5 there. And we notice that k was negative 2. So I put it in for negative 2 here. However, when I simplify a minus a negative 2, that's how it becomes plus 2. And taking a look at r was 7, so I just put it in for r. And then 7 squared was 49. You might notice that if I were to read this the other way, and I were to start out with this equation, and I would ask you what the center is, then the actual coordinates of the center are opposite of these symbols. So the center is 5, negative 2. Because the generic formula assumes that whatever point you have, you're subtracting it from your x value. And you're subtracting it from your y value. So if I were going to get a subtraction problem, I would have to convert this back to a negative 2. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I've got 2 problems. Where you, yeah. So I've got 2 problems here. I want you to convert this from information about the center and the radius to an equation in standard form. That equation is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Take this information, write it in standard form, then do the same thing for this problem. All right, let's see how it worked out. So for A, I had a center of 3 and 5. So I'm going to replace the x values with 3. I'm sorry, the h value with 3 and the y value with 5, respectively. And then the radius was 6. And then all I have to do is evaluate the radius. I don't even care if you write this step. In my opinion, when you're doing something this simple, there's not even a whole lot of work to show. You could just go straight to the answer. So that's the answer right there. I forgot the little squared right here, but that's the answer. Is everybody okay with that? In part B, we've got the center is negative 2, negative 1. So when I write x minus a negative 2, I'm going to write it as x plus 2. When I write y minus a negative 1, I'm going to write it as y plus 1. And then square root of 2 was the radius. What happens when you square a square root? It cancels out. And so what would I be left with in this case? Just 2. So that's your final answer for part B. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. Any questions about how you take information about having a center and a radius and turn it into a standard form equation? All right, on we go. Now, what was it in the last section that I needed to be able to write the equation? What pieces of information do I need? I need the center and the radius. Okay. In this particular problem right here, do I have the center and the radius? I've got the center, so that means I've got what? Right, I need to find the radius. So if I've got the center, what do I label the center as? HK. So I've got the H and the K. What am I missing? The R. So I'm missing, effectively, this length right here. You could use the distance formula. There's 2 different ways you could do this. You could write out the standard form and go ahead and plug 2 and 2 in for X and Y and solve for the R. And I think that's how I'm going to do it. Or you could do the distance formula. Either way, it's going to come out looking exactly the same. I'm going to go ahead and write out, since I'm such a big fan of the methodology of plug in what you know, find what you don't know, I'm going to start with just the generic form of the equation. X minus H squared plus Y minus K squared equals R squared. All right, and I'm going to plug in what I know. I know X to be a value of 2 because I've got a point on here that's 2. Now that's not the only X, that's just the X for this particular part of the problem. And then I know H to be 1, and then I know Y to be another 2, and I know K to be a negative 3. The problem is I'm missing R. So what's 2 minus 1 squared? 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. 1 squared is 1. What is 2 minus a negative 3? And what's 5 squared? 25. It's equal to R squared. So that means 26 would equal to R squared. I think I'm going to leave it. I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to find out what R is because in my formula, I represent that side of the equation with R squared. So it'd be kind of silly to take the square root of both sides now and then just turn around and square it again later. Since I know what R squared is and I know what HK is, I have enough information to write the standard form. So standard form, if you'll remember in standard form, we keep the X and the Y as a variable. So that's going to be X plus H squared plus Y, and I said plus, it shouldn't be plus, it should be what? Minus. X minus H squared, Y minus K squared equals R squared, and I know that X is 1, and I know that K is, I know that H is 1, I know that K is negative 3, so minus a negative 3 is going to be plus 3. And then I know R squared to be 26. So by substitution, I can just replace it. And that's your final answer. So these problems will come from finding out the things you need to know to fill in the equation, and then you just fill the stuff in. So I didn't know the radius, but I knew one of the points, which let me find the radius. Now that I know the radius, I can go back and plug it in. The trickiest part about this stuff is, I think, keeping the R squared stuff where it's supposed to be. All right, what is the standard equation of a circle with a center of 4, 3 that passes through the point negative 1, 1? Go through and see if you can't. All right, let's see how we did. So I'm going to actually use this formula. I'm going to rewrite it again over here because first I'm going to use that standard form to find R. And then once I've found r, I'm going to reuse this formula to write it in standard form. So basically, once I find h, k, and r squared, I will be good to use this side, and I'll be good to come up with the answer. And I've already got h and k. I've already got two of the pieces of information. So once I find r squared over here, I'll be fine. So this is x, this is y, this is h, this is k. So -1 minus 4 squared plus 1 minus 3 squared equals r squared. So -1 minus 4 is -5. -5 squared is 25. 1 minus 3 is -2. -2 squared is 4. And so hopefully you got 29 for r squared. And I'm not going to take the square root of it because I'm looking for r squared. So now I'm done with finding r squared. Now I've got all my information. So your final answer is x minus 4 squared plus y minus 3 squared, that's your h and your k, is equal to 29. That's your r squared. Say what? You got -22? Or -29. So there's no way that these values can be negative after you square them. If I take -5 and square it, that's -5 times -5, which is a positive 25. So make sure that you remember when you're squaring stuff that the answers always have to be positive. All right, graphing. So if I'm going to graph a circle, I need to know where the center is, and I need to know what its radius is. And then I can probably do enough to sketch a graph. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create something that kind of looks like a coordinate plane. And then I'll just copy it so we'll have some graph. Let me make that a little bit smaller. So let's do 0.4. Didn't do anything, did it? .75. 0.75. Yeah, I get it. So yeah, that makes it a little bit smaller. All right, so I'm just going to take a picture of one of these sections so I can draw my circle in it. So the center of the circle, let's say this is the center of the circle. If I were drawing the coordinate plane, my center would be 7, -2. 7, -2 is the center, and my radius would be what? No, that's 64, so r squared is 64. What would r be?
Square root of 8.
8. All right, so let's say that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say that this was the origin. Okay, so if that's the origin, here's my coordinate plane. When you say that this point right here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -2. So all I have to do is go 8 points, which is the radius in each direction from here, and then I should be able to sketch the circle. And this is just kind of a rough sketch, but here's what your circle would look like. So if I ask you to graph a circle, that's how you do it. All right, see you tomorrow.